Hey guys, it's Sarah. Let's talk about identity after becoming a mother. Let me know in the comments if a massive change in identity and maybe even a struggle with that is something that happened for you after moving into motherhood. I think there's a lot of information, when you're pregnant with your first baby and it's all exciting, and there's lots of information on, breastfeeding and what sort of things to buy for the baby, but there's not so much information out there on what happens to you personally afterwards, going from a non-mother to a mother. So actually this sense of a loss of identity in motherhood is a lot more common than we would think. I think a lot of women, after they've had a baby, we tend to be very good at kind of masking and putting a brave face on things, and just generally pretending we're fine when perhaps internally we are having a bit of an identity crisis or struggle and we're not quite sure who we are anymore. Now, I don't think this just happens after you go from not having children to having your first child. In my experience, there's almost different stages of it. So I think there's the obvious stage of going from no kids to one kid. Then for me, there was a definite change in going from one to two children. But I think there are all these different facets of the journey to becoming a mother. So things that might have a factor on our identity after becoming a mother, things that have happened before the early stages of motherhood journey, so say infertility or miscarriage. And there are also the situations that happen after we've had the baby. And some of those might have a greater bearing on your sense of loss of identity or not. For example, having two children close in age, or twins, multiple children at the same time. It's a big demand, and it can be a big strain. So as well as the different aspects of before and after having kids, which can all come in and mishmash together and affect that identity and how you see yourself, there's also the factor of our day-to-day lives. So a lot of us have probably been on the career ladder to some degree before we had children. So I think regardless of the situation that you've been in personally, before or during becoming a mother, it's a transformative process, and you're never quite the same afterwards as you were before. Now, in the early days of babyhood, we're often like in survival mode. So we're sleep deprived and on hand all the time to feed and look after baby. And if you have kids quite close in age, you might find that period of kind of survival mode lasts for quite a few years. And if you don't have kids close in age, you might find that you kind of like yo-yo in and out of that phase of life. So you might have the survival mode for a while, and then a few years of finding yourself again and who you are and coming to terms with your identity, and then having another child, and you've got to then redistribute that family unit again as there's another person in it, and suddenly you feel like you're back to square one with not being quite sure who you are again. Essentially, the birth of a baby can be the trigger for the rebirth of the mother. So in a nutshell, I think mothers often lose their identity because they just lose themselves in motherhood in this kind of survival mode. And then as the baby gets a bit older and you get into toddlerhood, and you come out of the survival mode, there's often like this long and messy process where we kind of slowly start to rediscover ourselves, who we are now, what our interests are, which have probably changed, what our priorities are, which have definitely changed. So the rest of this video is just a few tips that I've personally found useful for reconnecting with my own identity after babies. So tip number one is to make space for your emerging self. In the early days, as we say, we're in the survival mode, there's not much time that you get to yourself. But anywhere where you can carve out anything like 5 minutes just to even go outside and look at the sky and focus on your breathing, or taking a bath, anything. Something I found really useful was doing meditation when I had a baby breastfeeding who then conked out on me and could not be moved. So it was that was the real lesson in learning to be present and doing meditation, and that helped also on a rest level as well, because I felt rested even though I couldn't actually fall fully asleep. But it also helped with helping me rediscover who I am. Tip number 2 is find out what you enjoy. So this might not be what you enjoyed before. So maybe, again, as baby gets a little bit older, time to try like a new hobby or a class or meet new people and try and get out there, which again can often feel really overwhelming, especially if you're introverted, and especially after this whole situation in 2020 where a lot of us have been, at home. Some of us have brought babies into the world and been stuck at home for months, so going out there and meeting new people is already overwhelming anyway once you're a new mum, but this adds a whole extra layer. So baby steps, just try and get out there, even if it's for like an hour or two at a time, but keep trying and push that comfort zone because it will help you. Tip 3 is pursuing your dreams. Now, this can often bring up debate, which I've especially seen on social media, that some people don't like it when you as a mother pursue your dreams, which is probably because they haven't pursued theirs really. So pursuing your dreams is like the best thing you can do, not only for yourself but for your kids as well. And yes, it's difficult because we're wired, we're biologically wired to put our children first. But obviously if we do pursue our dreams, we're setting an example for our kids to observe, so that, hopefully we want them in the future to pursue their dreams. And also B, if you do put your life on hold and you don't pursue your dreams, then putting something on hold can, from like a year, a couple of years, can easily add up and become a couple of decades in the rest of your life. And you don't want to get further down the road into your life and then have that kind of stewing resentment that's built up over the years because you've put everything on hold for your children. So the final tip, which I talk about quite a lot on my YouTube channel, is simplifying life. And again, this relates to that concept of creating space for yourself to find out who you are and what your priorities are and how you fit into your changing family and also the wider world. So firstly, you have permission to stop doing what it is that you don't want to do anymore. Unless it's wiping kids' bums, you should probably still do that if they're not potty trained yet. But simplifying life looks also like setting boundaries around, yourself and interactions with other people who can be draining, which sounds hard, but once you start practicing and getting into it, it's not as bad. And also, looking after kids is exhausting, so you don't really need to be drained by other adults as well. And my personal favourite is getting rid of material things that you don't need or want or use anymore. All of this process is finding out your priorities as well, what matters in your life now. And these come up in big transitions in life, so like birth and death. You really focus on what matters in your life, and then that will highlight what it is you can let go of. So I've done a vlog or two and some videos about starting up with minimalism and how I'm moving towards that in my life. I don't think I'll ever be sort of white room with a table and a plant pot and nothing else, especially not with children, but getting rid of stuff I find incredibly liberating, and I've got rid of a lot of stuff. But it just seems to, if you get rid of things on a physical level, it feels like life's simpler, and then that kind of filters through into the rest of your life as well. So let me know if that was useful for you, and if you have any other tips on kind of finding your identity after motherhood. Just let me know in the comments below, or just hit subscribe and you can find out when I'm doing more videos on throwing things away and other exciting things like that. Otherwise, see you next time.